Hi, good everyone. Thanks for joining me. My name's Nichols. Today I'm just going to talk about Israel Adesanya, who, as you probably know, if you've been following UFC, and especially if you're Australian, New Zealand, he's the current UFC middleweight champion. So he was there's an interesting video of him recently of him watching the latest UFC fight of Alexander Volkanovski. And Alexander Volkanovski gets caught in a really difficult spot where he gets caught by Brian Ortega in a guillotine. And he's very close to losing. And you see Israel, getting up, and he's so engaged. He's so there. He's so emotionally attached. He's begging Alex to not give up. Like, he's just pleading with him in front of this screen. But like, obviously Alex is in a different country. Like, but he's so engaged. He's so there, and he cares so much. And it's interesting insight into who Israel is, and it's a really important point where he's emotionally. Izzy seems to be a very emotionally empathic person, and I really think that this is a reason why he found it so hard to do office work. So there's a story that he says that basically got quite depressed doing office work before he managed to make it into going to China and doing martial arts full time. I really think the reason is that he's a very creative person. He's very into movement, but he's also a very people person. He truly seems to bond and connect in a really deep way with the people around him. Like, you just see these photos or videos of him with children, with his friends and stuff. You can tell that he's this very, very deep, personable person. And I think that is a double-edged sword. I think that's one of the keys to success. He actually knows his opponents. He understands his opponents. He can feel his opponents. Like he said, he can feel their energy. And I think what he means is he actually truly connects with them in a way that most people never really do. And again, it's a double-edged sword, so he can feel the energy of his friends, he can feel the energy of his opponents. And he's always, it's just one of his skills, it's just how he's built. And I do think that it's a bit of a double-edged sword. I could be wrong, but you notice when he starts talking, you understand that he understands fame, but he also understands the problems that come with fame. And it's almost like he's talking himself to, like, he knows the traps he could fall into, and he seemed to be intentionally not falling into those traps. There's one interesting story he said, which I thought was quite something. It's when he comes back from one of the fights where I think he just became champion, or maybe the other ones where he made one a decisive victory, and at that point he's a champion. So he's really in the top of the world. And he goes and he has his shower, and what he says in the interview later on, it might have been with Ariel Helwani or might have been someone else, he basically said, look, didn't feel like I thought it would feel. He didn't feel as happy as he thought, and he immediately thought, oh, there's something wrong. So at the top of his game, really where you're most vulnerable to going off the path, because you have everything you strive for and you fought for, he knew. It's almost like he could see himself in the mirror. And maybe that's what the shower thing's about. Maybe he doesn't actually say it. But I bet you any money that he has a shower and he washes all away and he thinks. I bet you any money that he gets clean. I bet he stares at that mirror and thinks about who he is. I bet you any money he stares into his own eyes and really tries to understand his soul. I bet you any money that's what he does. He tries to understand himself in that moment when the whole world's gone crazy and he's accomplished something that really, even to him, probably sometimes seems almost impossible to comprehend. I mean, even when he talks about himself, you can see that he sometimes gets awed by his own genius. He sees the things that he does in the cage, and he can see that almost as a different person. And sometimes you can see he's obviously kind of almost amazed about his own abilities at certain points. So it is an extraordinary thing that he's able to fight opponents in the cage, but he doesn't ever seem to let down his guard. He's also able to fight himself. So that moment when he's victorious, when he wins the fights, and after that where he's on top of the world, that's the moment where he's most vulnerable to himself. And he realized that. The fact that he can see and realize that he's only ever fighting himself both in and out of the cage. And even in that moment of intense vulnerability, when he sees himself, he's able to fight himself in those moments. That's a mark of not just a good fighter, not just a great fighter, but that's a mark of a true champion. And obviously, there are other champions that I don't want to get into the details, but we all know there are these other champions that have kind of fallen on difficult times because they've strayed off that path. Because there's a lot of obviously a lot of incentives to start the path. When you're a champion, you've got everything you want, you've got all the accolades. It is a very difficult thing to keep going along that path. I think the one person who's probably similar to Israel is probably Rose Namajunas. I know that obviously they're superficially a lot different, but I feel that she's very similar. She feels things very intently. And she has, I mean, her life at the beginning obviously sounds very, very tough. I can't remember the exact details, but it just sounds like a very, very tough life. But yeah, she seems to feel things very deeply. Again, she's a champion too, and she's filled with extraordinary abilities. But you can tell that every fight takes an enormous amount out of her emotionally, enormous amounts. All right, I think that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.